Welcome to the Listen Up podcast, where we explore hearing loss, communication, connections, and health.
Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Sims here. I'm the host of the Listen Up podcast, where I feature top leaders in healthcare. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss is that I lost my brother Robbie twice. First to hearing loss from radiation to his brain tumor, and then when he passed away. This episode is brought to you by Listen Up Hearing Center. Listen Up Hearing Center was founded by me. It is a clinical practice that takes care of people with hearing loss. The reason I'm so passionate about hearing loss, I'm the E of ENT. I only care for ears. I performed over 10,000 ear surgeries and taken care of many more with hearing loss. I've also written a book called Listen Up, A Physician's Guide to Effectively Treating Your Hearing Loss. If you want to learn more about that, go to listenuphearing.com. That's listenuphearing.com. Today, we have a great guest. It's Suzanne Picerno. She is a hearing impaired hearing aid dispenser who founded At Home Hearing Services. She's excellent at describing and sharing her hearing journey. She just told me, an author of a book called Eddie the Elephant's Magical Ear, and we're going to learn more about that. We're privileged to gain her perspective as both a patient and a clinician. This is a really awesome time, and I'm excited to talk to Suzanne. Suzanne, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on.
So, for the listeners, can you share your hearing journey? I mean, in terms of what's happened for you, I believe you had a later onset hearing impairment. Is that right?
Yes, over about 30 plus years.
When were you first diagnosed?
It's so funny. I was first diagnosed when I was about 12-ish or so. It's actually kind of funny because in retrospect, I'll start with the end and go to the beginning. It's kind of what led me to write Eddie the Elephant's Magical Ear, because I was 12 years old and I kept getting pulled out of class and put these things over my ears, raise your hand when you heard the beep. And I was very embarrassed getting pulled out of class all the time. And I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why it was happening. Nobody told me anything. I just kept getting pulled out of class. And finally, I just got to the point where I just sat there and the beep went and I didn't really care. I just decided I wasn't raising my hand anymore. I was done.
Sure.
And after you're 12, what happens? You go on to high school and nothing happened. And I was always a great student. So intuitively, I sat dead center in the front of the room and I got straight A's. I was a very involved student, did the same in high school. And my mom, myself, my family, we just completely forgot all about it. Then in college, I ironically was doing a double major with psychology and speech and language and audiology. And I find out that you have a hearing loss, Suzanne.
Wow.
Done.
So you're re-diagnosed in college, essentially.
Yes. But I didn't get hearing aids until I was around 25.
Why is that? Do you know? I mean, in hindsight?
Because I got sick of hearing myself say, what?
No, but why? Okay, so that's why you did at 25, but why didn't you in college?
I didn't really realize that it was affecting me. I think I was like everybody else. I thought I heard just fine.
You didn't know what you didn't hear.
I got straight A's in college. I graduated Phi Beta Kappa. I was very involved. But, it's interesting. In retrospect, when I look back over the course of growing up in high school and all that, I was supposedly very popular and all that, but I never felt that way. I always lived with this tinge of fear and anxiety. And I think in looking back, it takes so much effort to live. Yeah. And I think I was always kind of like a pins and needles sort of to be trying to hear. And I hadn't realized that until the day came when I realized that I wasn't hearing and found myself saying, what? And I remember actually, just funny how our minds work that way. I was doing my internship to get my MFCC, marriage, family, child license. And it was in downtown Los Angeles. And I got vertigo. An inner ear infection caused that vertigo. And that dropped my hearing enough where it became very noticeable to me.
Right.
Yep. Funny, I forgot all about that.
Sure. And so based on your narrative, you pursued the psychology counseling route more than the hearing speech language route. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I thought, if I'm hearing impaired, how can I do audiology?
Okay.
It just, how could that work? Right. It never occurred to me that you could sit in both chairs.
Sure. And so a couple things. What was your hearing aid experience like in your 20s? I mean, it's much different now. So what was it like initially? So just describe what they were like and how your experience was as a patient.
So in my 20s, they were essentially amplifiers.
Right.
And my hearing loss wasn't bad enough at that point that I had to wear behind the ears. It wasn't, it wasn't that devastating for me in terms of how I felt about myself or perception or anything like that. It was when I became like in my 30s, that is when it changed for me.
So how so?
Pardon me?
How so? It'd be interesting to hear. It
Right.
sounds like it really came home or something.
Who I had for 14 years, she said I had to go to behind the ear hearing aids.
Ah.
And I was highly resistant. I didn't want to because at the time, this was before receiver in the ears, and it meant having the tube, and they were much larger then. And I've always been really outgoing, yet also self-conscious internally.
Sure.
Part of me that I don't let anybody see.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt really embarrassed. And it was interesting because, I would cut my hair in a certain way. And the thing is, nobody really cared but me. But I think it was a self-esteem thing that I carried with me. And what was also very interesting was that people always thought that I heard much better than I did because I couldn't pronounce sounds that I couldn't hear because I had studied speech pathology. So my speech was impeccable. So people always forgot. So it was like a liability almost. Someone sees hearing aids and they think, oh, she's fine, but I wasn't. And as my hearing continued, it's genetic. So it was progressive and genetic. And as it continued to decline, let's just say it ruined my life, ruined my ear. I always tell people there's not a day that I don't cry about my hearing. Not a day.
And I mean, it's okay if you don't want to share, but like when you say that, what were the things how it impacted you? I mean, I know you and I know, but might be helpful for the listeners for you to talk about those. If you don't, that's okay.
No, that's fine. I've always been very open about having a hearing loss. I have a sister who has hearing loss and she always tried to hide it. And it's funny because it affected her career just as much as mine affected mine. I went into pharmaceuticals in my mid 30s, and I was a very, very successful sales rep. Mm-hmm. And I actually became number one in the country. Wow. And promoted. Well, when you're out in the field, you pretty much are under the radar. And I knew that I wasn't hearing everything, but you could get away with it a little bit.
Sure.
Going inside into corporate, it became much more noticeable to me that I wasn't hearing, but I was too embarrassed to really take action on it. At that time, this was about 2008 to 2014, during that stretch of time.
Sure.
We didn't have what's called social access, right? So the companies I worked for were fantastic. They gave me a Bluetooth phone, all that stuff. But there wasn't like a special seat at the table that was Suzanne's seat. You didn't have those kind of things. So the perception creates reality. So perception was, I was a bull in a china shop. I didn't respect authority. I didn't do what was told. Well, someone says, we're not going to do such and such, and all I hear is we're going to do such and such. There I am, off in the wrong direction, right? Or I touch a client on the shoulder because I need to see his face, right? And it's perceived as assuming a relationship of close earned, right? Or you're at a dinner event with clients and you can be holding that same glass of wine all night long. And as the noise increases in the room, I'm yelling. And so it appears that I'm intoxicated.
Right.
Or hearing impaired people, we hate the phone. I still tremble on the phone. It's like I would rather get text than get a phone. So I would always type things versus picking up the phone, where other people would, just pick up the phone, have a conversation. There's no trail of evidence. Well, my trails of evidence were right there, where, we're behind on budget, or we dropped the ball here. So performance reports come along, and guess what? Suzanne's always making these mistakes on her project, and ironically, nobody else is, right? So I learned a lot in retrospect, things that I didn't understand then. And so one of the things that I take very seriously now is I am a huge advocate and an advisor. And in fact, I slowly writing a book that discusses this.
Sure.
It's what I call unintended discrimination. There's absolutely no intention whatsoever to hurt a person or anything. It's just hearing loss in general is not understood.
Right. So the people don't understand what's happening, so they can't contextualize the things that you are doing.
Exactly. Who's doing it, we don't know either. And what I come to understand is what we do as compensatory behaviors are perceived as incompetency at times or aggressiveness at times. It's very, very interesting. I have spent a lot of hours and hours and hours thinking about these things.
Sure.
So, yeah, I cried a lot because I hated having hearing loss. And when I became a hearing aid dispenser, I cried because I would give my right arm to be able to hear. And I would tell people, I would kill for your bad hearing. Your hearing is really, I would die to have your bad hearing. You know what I mean? It's isolating and it hurt. It's freaking painful emotionally. And it got to this point where I went from being someone who was a life of the party kind of person to the year before I got my cochlear implants, I didn't leave the house except to go to the grocery store. I spent a year because I couldn't hear anybody. I couldn't understand what the heck was going on. And it was just too painful.
And so at that point, I assume the hearing aids, you maybe still wore them, but they didn't give you much benefit?
No, I was functionally deaf at that point. Okay. I had to get fired 6 times from different hearing aid companies before I gave up. I'm a very determined person. And I was like, I was determined that I was not going to give up. I was not going to give up. And
Yeah, your ear did, even though you did, right?
After the sixth time, I realized that, gosh darn it, I can't do this. I really can't do it. And yeah, so it's funny now because here I am, and I have a very small practice. I only work pretty much with insurance companies, Medicare Advantage. I basically work with the people that the franchises don't want to see.
Sure.
It take a lot of time, and there's not much money to be made. But I love working with the senior citizens. They're amazing people. I have the time to do so. Um, I love it. They're just great people.
That's great. And so tell us a little bit about, so you have cochlear implantation in both ears, is that right?
Yes.
And when did you undergo that?
So it has been 4 years. What's interesting is prior to that, I spent 5 years in the gray zone. Okay. My PTA was like 84,
Mhm.
1 point away. It was a lot more difficult. It's not as stringent anymore, but it was a lot more difficult. And my uh, word recognition scores always came in about 50%. So I didn't qualify. And finally, an audiologist said, why don't you just say what you actually hear versus what you know? Because I knew every word.
Oh, you knew the lists.
I would hear ooh, A, and I'd go, toothpaste,
Mhm.
oh, baseball, right?
Right.
So when I did that, my word recognition was about 12%.
Wow.
And bingo. The insurance company actually approved bilateral implants with no problem. So I had them both done at the same time because I had the background, because I had been fighting for 5 years to get it done. I was highly motivated. I had done FM, I had done Bluetooth, I had
You
already
tried everything, right?
microphones, I had done everything. Yeah.
So can you describe the different, what is the difference between hearing with your cochlear implant and the hearing that you remember much earlier in your hearing, before your hearing loss got so bad? What's the difference? Because people ask me that, and I don't have a cochlear implant, so it's hard for me to describe. And you seem very good at describing
Well,
this.
I'm pretty good at describing it. I tell people, think of Morse code. You've got a plus and a minus, and that's basically cochlear implants. You have a plus and a minus. So that's why a lot of people hear beep, 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 beep at first.
Mhm.
I was lucky. I heard speech right away,
Right.
but I hear tonality. So I couldn't distinguish between sexes, right? But speech, except when something was a sound or a voice or a loudness that I was not accustomed to. And then I would hear that, right?
The modulation of the volume.
Uh-huh. Good. Yes. Good sound. Good word, rather. Um, and I was able to hear things that I haven't heard in God knows how long. Like I'd be sitting on the porch and I'd say, what is that sound? Crickets. Gosh knows how long I had
Hadn't heard them.
crickets, right? Or the rain falling, thunder,
Sure.
things like that. And it's interesting because I got these things now, like attached to the side of my head.
Sure.
People are kinder.
I think if people can appreciate that's one of the things. If you hide your hearing loss, then people don't accommodate it. If they know you have hearing loss, I think they're much more sympathetic. And unlike blindness, you don't wear, dark sunglasses and a red and white pole, cane to communicate to people. So it is helpful if people know, I assume, for you.
Yeah. Well, even when I had hearing aids, people knew and they were visible. But when someone's got something stuck to the side of their head, people go, ooh, they must really have had something wrong with them, and I don't try to like hide it under my hair. A lot of people with the smaller um,
Processors.
processors, they're starting to gain much more popularity now. But people still like to put them, underneath their hair and such. And I don't, because that's one thing I don't like about them. The microphones, your hair's right against it. So you hear crunchy noises. So I put them on top of my head, on top of my hair. I would say one thing though, the benefit of hearing aids have gotten so good these days that they can reach depths that, 4 years ago they couldn't. So I think cochlear implants really are a last resort. And the benefit that hearing aids have that I don't think cochlear implants match is noise control. Because you basically have a program, but you don't have noise control. Although with the new Camzos, which is what cochlear makes, they have directional microphones where these don't.
Sure. Well, the outside parts are always getting better. So,
Yes.
I mean, if you compare what you have compared to 20 years ago, it's night and day. And so whatever is going to be for you 10 years or 15 years from now is probably going to be so amazingly better than what you have now.
Right. And I like to tease with it too. Like I go to the airport and I always ask, are you sure there's no magnets in that? Because if I go through there and you fry my brain, you're responsible.
I assume they pause for a second.
Fun with it now, and I don't cry every day like I used to.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about what led to you writing a book. It's Eddie the Elephant's Magical Ear. Can you tell us a little bit about the thought process behind wanting to write a book and what the book's about and the goal of the book?
Because hearing, as you know, for the most part, isn't in the medical model. And, when I get my patients and I say, when's the last time you had your ears checked? And they say kindergarten or never, you go, wow, there's a gap.
Yeah, big one.
85% of all hearing loss is caused by loud noise. So where are we educating people? We're not. And if we go back to the beginning, it's with kids. And if kids realize and are taught when they're young that, hey, this is what a loud noise is. This is what too loud is. And we do it in a fun, creative way. And with it, I also have a color and learn book where it's like a coloring book. And there's little exercises that can be done in class or such where they get like a hands-on experience. And it could be done in a group or it could be done with a parent and such. And they learn all these cool things. But when you can recognize and know what's too loud, then you can learn to avoid those things and you preserve your hearing and you learn to value your hearing. And Eddie, what's different about him versus our patients is he remembers what it was like to hear. And because of that, he's got deep feelings of sadness and he wants to find his hearing.
Okay.
He wants to hear. So that was one of the reasons I wrote it, to help children learn about how they can protect their hearing. What is a hearing aid? What is hearing loss? Those type of things. On the flip side, it's also for parents. Hearing is complex.
Sure.
Adults that get hearing aids and they go home. And I know this for a fact. I talked to a gentleman who was in the military and I met him at a hearing conference and he had a 3-year-old. And he was telling me that his 3-year-old will take his hearing aids and go and hide them. He'd be looking all over for his hearing aids. He said, if I could just get him to stop. I said, well, here, buy my book. Right. And the little boy loved it because it actually taught him, oh, this is not a toy that daddy has in his ears. They're not a toy. It's a tool. It's something important, and I shouldn't be hiding them.
So is
in
that the target audience, 3 years? I mean, what is the age range for the book?
So it actually really varies. I mean, it can be from preschool through, I had an 11-year-old absolutely love it. I did a library reading, and this 11-year-old girl just absolutely loved it. She said it was her favorite book.
Oh,
So I think definitely through your elementary school years, for sure. But again, there's information for parents too. You can't just look at a simple book and go, oh, okay, this is simple and the pictures are cute. There's actually a lot of lessons in here that when you read, I kind of wanted something almost subliminal. When you try to talk to people about hearing and hearing loss, the first thing they want you to do is to shut up. My mother in her retirement community, she's going to listen to this, by the way. She always tells me, don't talk about hearing or hearing aids.
That's what you do.
Do I? All the time.
I know, but I mean, it's like, it's your occupation. It's your avocation. I mean, it's what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, you write about it, you live it, and you do your getting a living from it. I mean,
I can be very, very much on my bandwagon, because it's like when somebody comes to buy a car, they don't buy the car that day. They're not coming back for another 6 months. And it's the same with hearing aids. And
Sure.
when it tells you they do not value their hearing, they need to hear it. They need to understand that what you do now, and that's the thing too in the book, what you do now, what a child does now. For example, at the Super Bowl, when you watch it on television, I saw one player have ear protection on his little child. One.
Sure.
And that place was roaring. One. All their kids are there. How many decibels is that?
Sure. Very loud.
Or movie theaters are supposed to be no louder than 80 decibels. I don't think so.
No, they're very much louder than that.
Yes. Hairdressers, even over time with their blow dryers, can cause hearing loss.
Sure.
People
Sure.
be educated, and people don't understand about how hearing loss happens. And they need to know that, I mean, if they truly want to be able to hear, they need to understand how hearing loss occurs. And it occurs over time. And that little kid that continued to be overexposed to loud noise, it might not affect him right now, but 30 years from now, guess what? He's going to be wearing hearing aids because of the things he did when he was little.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm very, very, very passionate about all this. And
No, this is great. So where can people get Eddie the Elephant's Magical Ear if they want it, Suzanne?
I'm sorry?
Where can they where can they obtain the book? It's on Amazon. Is that where they can get it? Or?
Amazon. And guess what? Tomorrow is my birthday. So I'm saying it's Eddie's birthday. So Eddie the Elephant's Magical Ear, if people go to Amazon, the Kindle version will be free.
Wonderful. Happy birthday, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. And there's no strings attached. I just did a LinkedIn invitation. And I would there's no strings attached. They don't even have to give their name. They don't have to sign up for anything. There's nothing to purchase after that. It's totally free because I want to educate people. I'm huge on educating people. It is my passion. Because I want people to hear.
Sure. No, it's wonderful. I sense it. It's really amazing. And you're really committed as a patient and a practitioner and an educator.
Yeah. And one of the things that is always true, I could always start off with patient. When I was in the retail environment, because people now come to me and they already know they're going to get hearing aids. they've already decided.
Sure.
But in the retail environment, people sit down and I would say, I sit in both chairs.
Yeah, definitely.
Instantly.
That's great. Suzanne, what's your favorite sound?
The ocean.
That's a wonderful sound. Yeah.
Yep.
So Suzanne, this is Suzanne Picerno. She, as a founder of Home Hearing Services, author of Eddie, the Elephant's Magical Ear. If people want to get a hold of you, how could they get a hold of you?
If they Google my name, I got 3 pages. I don't even know how you found me, frankly. But you can get me on Twitter at deafgirl2, deafgirl, DEAFGRL, the number 2. Or they can just go on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Breaking the Silence of Hearing Loss. That's easy to find me there.
That's great.
At hearingservices.com.
Lots of ways they'll find you, right?
Yes, probably.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your own personal experience and your passion and your book. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And this has been a great episode. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate your time and having me on it.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen Up podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get updates on future episodes.